Good evening, everyone.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. Tonight is August 23rd, 2023. It is 6:01 p.m., 6:02, and I would like to call to order the Columbus City Council meeting for tonight. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business tonight will be the consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
This is Janet. I move to approve consent agendas item 3 and 5. I'd like to move 4 to the next meeting because we just got them yesterday and haven't had a chance to thoroughly review them.
Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
I'll call for the vote. Rob?
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Is there anyone who would like to speak at the public open forum, either in the room or online? I see nobody putting up their little hand, so we'll move on. Our next order of business is a public hearing, a discussion and motion regarding the Columbus Lions Club one-day temporary on-sale liquor license request for 16319 Kettle River Boulevard premise. It's pages 1 through 14, and I believe this is pretty much the same thing we've had every year for how many years, Elizabeth? Several.
A couple years. We had a little hiatus, but we got Fall Fest back on track, and so yes, the Columbus Lions would like to hold a beer garden during the Fall Fest, and so they're coming before you for a one-day liquor license.
Is there anything that any of you would like to add to that statement? That covers it, pretty much? All right. Anybody up here have anything to add?
If this is a public hearing, do we need to read the public hearing notice or anything?
Oh, sorry, I forgot to waive that.
And is anyone here to speak on that?
The mayor would like to waive the reading of the public notice for this instance because I think everybody is here who is concerned. Is there anyone else who would like to speak as I open the public hearing portion of it? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion of the hearing with the right to reopen it if necessary. And now we can discuss. Any questions?
I do have a couple. One is relating to the lease, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now the lease, the term of the lease begins 24 hours and starts 12 a.m. on the 16th, but I understood you might want to try to set up on Friday? Just the 10th. So is that going to, doesn't matter, they can go ahead and set up the tent, and we don't have to change the term of the lease? Okay. And then the second thing, I just want to make a correction on the diagram. It just refers to Fall Fest on September 14th. It's on the 16th. So that's on page 5. Right. So that's just a correction for the record. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Anything from anyone else? If not, someone like to make
I can make the motion. This is Rob. I move to approve Columbus Lions Club one-day temporary on 8/16/23 sale liquor license request. On September 16th, 2023 for the premise at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota. That on threw me off.
I'll second the motion. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. All right, we're good to go.
And we're excited.
Yes.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Hope for some good weather. That's all we need now.
Yep.
55.
So, up next is number 8 is a public hearing discussion motion from Love's Travel Stops and Country Stores Incorporated for a 3.2% malt liquor sale license. Request for 15402 Hornsby Street premise, pages 15 through 22 of our packets. So again, I will waive the reading of the notice since everyone's here who's concerned. And I'll open the public hearing. Would you like to come up and introduce yourselves to us and then explain what you're asking for and how we can help you? Pull your microphone right up. There we go.
My name is Brooke. I'm the general manager of Love's Travel Stop. We are here to renew our liquor license. Yeah, so that's what I'm here for.
All right. So one thing I heard in discussion before the meeting, so actually you're not serving 3-2 beer now,
Correct.
but you have the license and you wish to maintain it so that in the future, if you care to, you don't have to go through the whole rigmarole from the beginning.
That is correct.
I've got that right.
Yep.
So you couldn't have had any violations yet?
No violations, no.
That makes it easy.
Yep.
Any other questions from the council?
Nope.
All right, then I will close the public portion of the hearing with the right to reopen it if necessary. And I'll ask again, does anyone have any questions or discussion?
Nope.
All right.
Brooke, I'm the city administrator here. We haven't formally met, but I just have one quick question, nothing to do with the liquor license, but how's Love's Travel Plaza doing as a whole, now that you're coming up on a year that you've been in Columbus?
Yeah, so it's doing great. I've only been there for about 6 months, so I got here in like March. But since I've been there, business is booming. We're happy to be there. A lot of traffic compared to some of the other stores I've ever been in. But I'm excited. This is my first promotion to a general manager. So I thought I was coming into a slow starter store, and then it turned out to be the busiest gas store in the company. So that was kind of a huge thing for me. But we're really excited to be here. It's a great location.
Did you say the busiest store in a company?
The busiest gas store in the company.
Out of 500 and some?
Out of 630. Yeah,
Wow.
Holy cow,
yes.
man.
I guess
So-
you picked a good location then.
Yes, fantastic location, yeah.
I have a quick question. How come you leave the trees on Highway 97 there blocking your sign?
I'm sorry, one more time.
The trees on it'd be 23 and 97, right out front, that
Like the
placard you got
marshland?
there? It seems to be blocked by those trees there. How come they never took them down?
That is not something that, a decision I was involved in. So that's something I would have to take up with, like, everything on the property is set by, like, Love's Corporate. And we have special landscapers that kind of work with our facilities maintenance department. So I don't really make decisions on that kind of thing, but yeah, I can escalate any of
Well,
that.
if you're going westbound, you don't even see it.
Yeah,
And it gives you prices and everything. I know when I come off of Hornsby, I look up there and I can't see your sign.
yeah,
So, well, you're doing a good job, though.
thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, any
That's great
other
news.
discussion?
Nope.
Someone like to make the motion?
I will. So I move to approve Love's Travel Stops and Country Stores Incorporated 3.2% off-sale malt liquor license request for the period commencing on August 24th, 2023, and terminating on March 31st, 2024, subject to the conditions 1 through 4 as listed in the staff memo dated August 23rd, 2023, for the premise at 15402 Hornsby Street in Columbus, Minnesota.
Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, I.
And Jesse, aye. So you're good.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for coming
coming.
in. Thanks for coming to Columbus, and next time we fill up, we'll come in and say hi.
All right, we're starting the Children's Miracle Network here in a couple of days, so make sure you come support the Children's Miracle Network. We're raising money.
Okay,
Come see us.
All right,
thank you.
all right. On to number 9, quickly. A public hearing, discussion, and motion. Interim Ordinance 23-07, authorizing did I skip one? No. Authorizing a study and imposing a moratorium on the operation of a cannabis business within the city limits, and that's on pages 23 through 35 of our packets.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
this is Bill Griffith online.
Yes.
Good evening. I've got this item. So this moratorium ordinance was held over from the last meeting to schedule the public hearing. If adopted, it will create a moratorium on a cannabis business being established in the city until there's time to consider and adopt regulations. And the moratorium would be effective until January 1, 2025.
Thank you. So on this issue, Elizabeth, should I read the public notice or not?
Bill, can we waive reading the public notice on this particular one because it's a moratorium?
Yes.
Okay, so first I'll waive the notice, reading of the notice, and then I will open the public hearing to anyone in the room or online who would wish to speak regarding the issue of a moratorium on cannabis businesses in Columbus. I see no one in the room jumping to their feet, and I don't see anybody online putting their little hand up. And so I'll close the public portion of the hearing with the right to reopen it if necessary, and ask the council, has anyone any questions regarding this issue?
Well, I was just going to, for everybody in the audience, if you don't understand what we're doing, is the moratorium is only to do a study, so we're just putting a hold on anybody opening up a cannabis business in Columbus until the state goes through the process of identifying what all the rules are going to be. So once, and that's about the time that those rules are going to be completed, is right before January 2025. So, in case you're wondering. So we're not saying that we're not going to do it. We're just doing a study to make sure that we have all of our rules and everything in place.
Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Bill, question for you online. Would this be including any like farming activities if someone, say a farmer was to switch a crop to something like that?
Mr. Mayor, council member, yes, any cannabis businesses, both the sale of cannabis and the production of cannabis. So it's my understanding that the moratorium would affect both. And you might recall that at the previous meeting, the council adopted a prohibition on use of cannabis products in public places. I just want to, for those listening in, that does not affect the rights of private citizens to use cannabis products now legally on their private property.
Thank you. And then one more question, the January 2025, so that's what the moratorium will run through. I guess it's more for the public. That's when the rules will be set forth by the state. Is that what it is, Bill?
Mr. Mayor, council member, yes, the longest term for the moratorium is January 1, 2025. Of course, if the city were to adopt regulations before that date, then you could lift the moratorium before that date.
Thank you, Bill.
This is Janet, but I just wanted to clarify even further is that these businesses would require licensing by the state, and the state is not set up to do that. And they're hoping to be set up before January 2025, but isn't that the date they have to be set up by? And that's the reason why that date is being chosen. So even if we didn't do this moratorium today, no one could establish this type of business until that licensing bureau is set up. Is that correct?
Yes, and when it is set up, there is a local, I guess it's review and consent that occurs. Now, the city can't prohibit completely a cannabis business, but based on our population, the city could limit the cannabis business to one based upon our current population. So there's a lot of layers to this, and that's one of the reasons cities like ours are looking at moratorium ordinances to basically work through all the layers, figure out what the appropriate local regulation should be, and then what level of regulation will be done by the state.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything? If not, I'll make the motion to approve an interim ordinance 23-07, authorizing a study and imposing a moratorium on the operation of cannabis businesses within the city. Is there a second?
Is Ron, I'll second.
Are there any other questions or discussion at this point? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, I.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Number 10, Planning Commission report. Sue, you are the liaison, right?
Yes. So the Planning Commission met last week, August 16th, and reviewed, it was the public hearing, for the swimming pool ordinance, and all Planning Commission and council members were in attendance. There was no comment from the public, although there was one person in the audience and one person online in attendance. We discussed the hybrid pool scenario, which is, you know, if it's halfway below ground and halfway above ground, because we have in-ground and above ground, but what about the ones that are a little bit of both? And so there was a lot of discussion about that, and Eleanor, our planning tech, had clarified that she changed the definition for the above-ground pool, which reads a swimming pool with any part of any sidewall exposed, that would go under the above-ground pool regulations. Also, the chairperson, Lynn Carver-Quinn, said that she went to the pool store in Blaine and asked about locks, and they suggested using the language of latchable and lockable for the gates, and that language is in the ordinance. Regarding the ladders, the language now reads, all above-ground pools shall have removable steps, which must be removed when the swimming pool is unattended, unless the stairs are equipped with a security mechanism. So I think we got through the whole discussion. I think everybody was in agreement on all the language changes. It did pass?
All but one.
All but one, but that was a pass. So they did make the recommendation to adopt the new ordinance as it is written. So I will make the motion, unless anybody has any questions beforehand. Okay.
I do have one question. So remind me, I know Dean brought up the example of a above-ground pool that was 3.9 feet and having the requirement of them. So I thought we had figured out how to deal with that, but I don't see that. I don't see that in this.
Well, anything that is below,
4 feet?
anything, if it has something above ground, even if it's 4 feet below for hybrid, it would go according to the above-ground rules, which needs to be 4 feet. So if it was 3.5,
Then it would be considered underground, right?
well, no, they would have to have a 4-foot.
Yeah,
If
but
it
I
doesn't
thought,
have a 4-foot wall, then they would have to add something to reach the 4 feet.
yeah, I'm remembering a different discussion than that, and when I read the changes here, I don't see that connecting to what we had decided. I thought what we decided is if it was under 4 feet, we weren't regulating it.
Well, I'm looking at page 7A-3, section K2, number 2. Above-ground pools require no fencing, provided all walls are non-climbable and remain at least 4 feet above all surrounding grades. Pools constructed partially below grade shall include guards or extensions above the pool to maintain a minimum height of 4 feet.
Right, but I thought, I mean, maybe it's in the definitions, and we don't have the definitions in our packet, so maybe that,
It's in 807.
say that again?
It's in 807, the definition.
At the beginning?
No, it's in A2.
Okay, so in the definitions, it says, in this section shall include any containers or structures with a water capacity greater than 5,000 and a depth of 4 feet or greater. So if you have a pool that's 3.9, it's not regulated, correct?
Correct.
And is that consistent with what is in number 2 on page 7A-3?
And I think the conversation built around that, Dean had pushed forth was like these pools that they blow up and then they take them down for the year,
yeah.
that it'd be hard to regulate something like that.
I think, I mean, I just want to make sure we're all clear, because I'm happy with that, but that's where the definition excludes, and that's different than I think what you interpreted it. That's where if you have a pool that's less, even if it's 5,000 gallons, if it's less than 4 feet tall, it's not regulated.
Not regulated.
Correct?
Doesn't require a permit.
And doesn't, so there's no rules. Okay. So I just want to make sure everyone's, I mean, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay.
Because it isn't when you just read you have to read the definition too.
You have to go to the definition to find out what's regulated, and then the regulations are in that section.
Right. Okay.
All right.
Thanks for clarifying.
I had to in my mind because I didn't remember if I remembered it correctly.
Okay, so I will make the motion. I move to adopt ordinance 23-05, amending Chapter 7A, swimming pools and housekeeping as presented.
Rob, I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. And it's a good, appropriate
big
day.
one.
Appropriate day to pass a swimming pool. All right. So thank you. What else that night, Sue? Anything?
That was it.
All right.
One more motion.
Oh, one more motion.
Publication.
So I move to adopt ordinance 23-05, amending Chapter 7A, swimming pool and housekeeping publication summary as presented.
I'll second that. Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
That was it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sue. Now we're on to Kettle Kove, a final plat, and that's pages 36 through 48. And we have an enclosure, looks like this. Why don't you guys come up to the table if you want, if you would.
Yep, he remembers from last time. Pull that microphone close.
Oh, yeah.
I try.
All right, so. Would you like to go ahead and give us a little bit, just a little bit of history, refresh us all? I think we all know where it is, right? And here we have the,
Well, over a year ago, I was contacted by Christine to help her develop a plan to sell approximately 30 acres of their 40-acre parcel in Columbus. And we took one step at a time and decided we would attempt to do that, hoping not to have to go through the subdivision process together, but we are, and that's okay. Along came Mr. and Mrs. Newville, who were very interested in the entire 30 acres with the intent of subdividing. And that is what has led to now hopefully getting final approval on the final plat that has been discussed at length, and we've made adjustments, and I think the way it looks to me, everything is in order for a final approval.
Elizabeth, what do you have?
So, Mr. Mayor and council members, what you have before you is the final plat. We've also included the preliminary plat. The preliminary plat has a little bit more detail and shows you the driveway accesses for each of the lots. There's a total of 6 lots in this subdivision. And we have, the engineer has reviewed the final plat. He doesn't have any further comments. Our planner has reviewed it. He's had 10 conditions. And in addition, there was a title commitment submitted to the city, and a title memo was prepared. There are some conditions in that title memo, and the applicants have read both the planner's memo and the title commitment memo and have agreed to those conditions. There will be 2 more documents in this subdivision. There'll be a developer's agreement and then an encroachment agreement for a drainage and utility easement. They will be rather simple documents. There's no public improvements in this particular subdivision. So the developer agreement is just mainly going to cover the shared driveway accesses and the understanding that the maintenance of those driveways will be by the property owners and not the city, because they are private driveways. There is an encroachment for drainage and utility easements, and also in the developer's agreement, it's going to identify that no trees will be taken down until the widening of Kettle River Boulevard as requested by the property owner, and so that's the document that will memorialize that request. So staff is asking that the council approve the final plat subject to the conditions in the title memo and in the planner's report. In addition, delegating the drafting of the developer's agreement and encroachment agreement and execute those agreements with the property owners. Any questions?
I have a question. So I was looking, this is the preliminary plat, but I don't see the final.
The second page is there's the final plat.
Okay. It just doesn't say final.
Yeah, it is, it's one of those things, it's one of the nuances of final plat. It doesn't say it, it's the one usually with all the signatures on it, and that's the one that's recorded. We generally give you both, just because the preliminary plat has so much more information. It's got the driveways and access, really, where the final plat, it just tells you a lot block and a legal description and a bunch of signatures, so it doesn't really tell you a whole lot, but that's intentional.
Okay. And you said that there really wasn't any major changes.
No changes.
Okay.
Bill, anything to add on the encroachment agreement or development agreement?
No, you've covered it all.
This is Rob. I got one question. So on block 2, would the entrance still be off 159th on that final plat?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I do appreciate that.
And so let me ask you for the record, you have received all the comments from the planner and the engineers, and you've read them, understand them, and agree with them?
Yes.
All right. Anything else I should ask Elizabeth for the record?
I think we've covered it. It's a pretty straightforward subdivision because there's no public improvements, and all driveway accesses are off of either a county or local road in this particular case, and there's very little wetland, so there's a fair amount of upland, which makes it a really nice subdivision.
All right. In that case, I'll make a motion to approve the Kettle Cove final plat, subject to the title memo dated August 9th, 2023 conditions, the planner's report dated July 31st, 2023 conditions, 1 through 10, and delegate to the city staff the execution of the development agreement and the encroachment agreement. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. There we go.
Thank you very much.
Yay, congratulations.
Appreciate your help.
Yep.
Thank you for coming in
Thank
tonight.
you.
Okay, good night.
Letter D, engineer report, Kevin.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you.
I have a question for Kevin, if that's all right.
Yep.
So thank you for sending me your notes from the meeting that you and Rice Creek had with the DNR. Is that topic a subject of an upcoming workshop, or are we going to talk further about that discussion?
I do have an update on that, on those notes. I just got an email this morning from Chris Otterness, the engineer for Rice Creek, and they are taking, he provided information that will be discussed at the DNR's Drainage Advisory Board, I think it's called, at a September 1 meeting. That's a Friday. So
That's a what?
it's a Friday
Okay.
that the DNR will be talking about this.
So is that a meeting that we should plan to attend, or is that
I
another
don't
one where
believe
it's only
so,
the
no.
technical minds?
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't know where it's at. I think it's a virtual meeting that they conduct amongst outstate and metro members of this board, the way it was explained to us. And so they basically consider whether it needs a public waters permit is kind of what the purpose of that particular discussion is, so.
So it sounded to me when I read the memo, and I did really quickly, so I may just have missed it, it sounded like at one point the DNR said you don't need one, and then somebody came in and said, oh yeah, but you know, you might. We need to talk about this more.
Well, the statute would say that any work under 103, I gotta get my 103D, that's the public drainage law. Any work that's considered repair or maintenance under that law doesn't require a public waters permit. But at the same time, the DNR is saying, well, not so fast because it is impacting public waters. They do consider whether it does need it, because if you're potential to drain a public waters, they want to talk about that, so.
And that's what's going to happen at the September 1st meeting?
That
or
is correct, yes.
Okay. So Elizabeth, I mean, the reason I'm asking this is because I've seen in the minutes at Rice Creek where it's been represented that the city's on board with this alternative 4, and we're not on board with it because we're still trying to understand the options and what the impacts are. So my concern is that I want to make sure that we're all on the same page before all of a sudden we get a memo from Rice Creek saying, yeah, we're going to lower the ditches and now you owe $30,000 towards that project, or whatever the bill will be. So I don't know if the best way to do this is like during a workshop where we, Kevin and we can all be there, or how we want to move forward with this.
My question would be for Kevin. So Kevin, are we still in the due diligence stage, and a project or path has not been chosen yet? Or is this is the path and they're just now trying to figure out what permits they need?
I think it's still in a due diligence phase from the Rice Creek's perspective. I think they're trying to determine what permits would be required. And I don't think they can necessarily do a maintenance project and say, here's a bill. I think they would have to get the city to agree before moving forward, because if they're saying that, well, your cost is any culvert repair or modification under your public roadways is your bill, I think we would have to approve that before they'd move forward.
And I think the concern I have is that we still aren't at I totally agree that they needed to have the conversation with the DNR because that's a showstopper until they get that figured out. But then I think it's really a matter of how much of the problem is what they're proposing going to solve, and I'm still not really satisfied with their answer on that yet. So, and I hate to throw good money after bad, or bad money after good, whichever direction that is. I mean, I want to know that if we're going to spend taxpayer dollars on a solution, that it's going to be a solution. So, and then just, so far, I'm not convinced of that.
So do you think that a letter needs to come at the direction of the council through the staff to Rice Creek saying, well, we fully support due diligence? You know what I mean? We want to be notified if there's any direct costs, or we can certainly do that to let them know that we haven't approved a particular project and we want to know if there's any cost to the city.
Well, I think there's that, but I also think, you know, we originally came to them saying there's a problem here, and it's your problem to solve because you're the watershed district. And they have done different things over the years to try to solve the problem, and it hasn't solved the problem. And so, you know, I think under pressure to them, they came up with these different alternatives. I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak to whether they make sense or not. But when we had that Teams meeting, what I heard everybody say was it's a combination of a groundwater and a surface water problem, and Rice Creek is only going to address the surface water problem. And while I understand that that's what they have authority over, it seems, you know, it's not a satisfactory answer to me if that's not going to solve the flooding problem. And I don't know what we should do about that. I don't know how you do something different than what we're doing right now, and maybe this is a question for Bill. But if you have a flooding problem in the city, and your Rice Creek, in your watershed district, who has the legal authority to address that, at least in terms of ditches, ditch maintenance and culverts and permitting, that kind of stuff, tells you that it's a combination of groundwater and surface water, and they've attempted several times to address the surface water, and it hasn't solved it, and now they have another example of, or not another example, but another attempt at doing that, but they know that it's not the complete solution. How do we solve the problem that we have as a city with flooding in an area that's had repeated flooding problems?
I don't have a quick answer to that.
And I
know we've
didn't
been,
expect you to, but I mean, that's really what I'm struggling
yeah,
with. I don't know if that's a
right.
workshop topic or if we should take that up at a council meeting, or I'm not sure.
Well, certainly, I'm just going to echo what the city engineer said. If there's a city participation in costs, the project doesn't go forward without some specific agreement for cost recovery. So that's obviously our leverage to better understand the solution and to weigh in on the solution. But I don't know how you solve something that's both ground and surface water. That's more the engineer's bailiwick.
Yeah, and I would only add that the proposed, this alternate 4 that's being discussed as a option for moving forward would maximize the capability of the Anoka County Ditch 102232 of operating at its maximum for surface drainage. That's pretty much the limitation of the Drainage Authority on our 103D. Anything beyond that would probably require other solutions that would not involve Rice Creek.
And do those solutions get pursued by a city if we're trying to solve the problem? I mean, you know, what I kept hearing was that the problem began when Jodrell Street was extended. We don't permit that. Coon Creek permits that. And so I mean, it's just been this very circular discussion, and I am sympathetic towards the residents that have been impacted there, and so I don't want to just stick a Band-Aid on it and go, well, you know, let's try this and see if it works. But I don't really know how to address this any other way, so I'm just asking the question. Maybe it's something you can think about, Bill. But I do like the idea of sending a letter clarifying our position at this point, that we're in a due diligence phase, and because I do think that it's been represented in the minutes, that at least the ones that I've read, that we're on board with this alternative 4, and I don't think that we're quite there yet.
No, I agree with that, Janet. So do you need a consensus to direct staff to write this letter that we are just in the discovery stage before and we would like to be
Sounds like
updated all the
I mean,
time?
I can send you the minutes where it was reported that, you know, we were on board with it, or whatever words they used, I can't remember. And then you might have something better to respond to, if that's helpful.
I think that would be helpful. Bill, you're thinking that there's a motion to direct staff to draft a letter to Rice Creek indicating that while we support the due diligence, we want to make sure we understand the cost before we actually, if there is a participation by the city in dollars. If there's no dollars affected and they want to move forward, then we would allow them to move forward. It's just if there's a dollar amount.
Well, I think then the second question is, how much does the city care that we have a continued flooding problem in this area? And if we know that this is not a complete solution, is there something else we should be pursuing?
It's my understanding that we don't have jurisdiction over groundwater either, because we got to get permits from the DNR for groundwater. So I don't think we have jurisdiction over that either.
No, I think you're right. And I don't know who does.
It may wind up being a private issue that isn't resolvable by public entities. I don't know that for a fact. That would require some additional exploration and from my perspective, a greater understanding of what the flooding issue really is.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, having it.
Because I don't have all the history and I don't have all the understanding of what the issues are.
Yeah, and I think that would be helpful to have that chronology spelled out, because it's been confusing to me too.
Well, and I'm learning more as I see more and more information, but at the same time, I don't know exactly where the flooding issues are at. I've read about trees, I've read about structures, but I don't know totally what all those issues are.
Well, would you, Kevin, would you be able to come some day in the future and spend an hour going through this? I mean, so that we can understand it better and you can get a better understanding, and then help us decide what to do. And we can drive over there and take a look if you're talking about a visual look at everything.
If that's your direction, I will do whatever you direct me to do.
Well, I think that would be good, because this is, it's how many acres? 40 acres? Down in that corner, 60 acres?
I think the ownership is a lot bigger than that, but maybe the most affected property is on a 40, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Mr. Wagaman owns a lot more than 40 acres.
But it's, I mean, I've heard from Mr. Nays that it impacts his property, and as I've said from the beginning, I've always been worried about if that ditch doesn't convey water the way it should, or the way it used to, that you might have some impact on the business side of Lake Drive and new development there. So, it's always easier to address it before everything gets built up and developed. Not that it's easy to address, but I just feel unsettled about this, because it feels like we just haven't made real progress. And there's been a lot of like, well, that's not our problem. Well, that's their problem. Not you, but it's DNR, it's Rice Creek, it's Coon Creek, it's the city, and it's like, it's all of our problems, but we're not sitting down together to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, whatever the answer turns out to be, we would like to understand it, or understand the engineering better from our point of view, and then decide where to point the fingers, because before the road went in, there was no problem. A month after the road went in, people's houses were getting flooded out. And that's 20 years ago or 30 years ago or something.
Where's the location, Janet?
And Joe Drell Street is the street, and 137th is sort of the other one that is big impact. And, that seems to be the point that the residents in that area around Pine Street and 141st.
141st.
Yeah,
And Zodiac.
and Zodiac noticed the problem. And so if you look at where that crosses, it kind of makes sense that that would create a problem. At the same time, although I know you asked the question about the raising of the water level in Carlos Avery, you know, I've heard that from a septic designer that that really changed the hydrology in certain parts of Columbus when they did that. But there doesn't seem to be any public record of that because it's not required to be done publicly. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and I feel sympathy for everybody who's been impacted by it. And of course, it's kind of hard to have this discussion. We're in the midst of a drought, but.
Well, here's what I would say from a technical standpoint. From a technical point of view, I am supportive of alternative 4 because it will maximize the ditch that we utilize for drainage. I think this project needs to be done regardless of what else might need to be done. And I don't say that from a cost perspective. I don't know what the costs are. From a technical perspective, I would be supportive of lowering those culverts to the ASIC elevation, which is technically what's determined to be the historic profile of the ditch. I think that needs to be done. Whether that solves all of the issues, I don't know. But regardless, I think that needs to be done, whether any additional alternatives need to be pursued.
That's helpful, thank you.
So question for you, Kevin, Rob here. Does that run from the north to the south, the water flow of that?
So that ditch runs essentially from north to south. It kind of curls. It starts, if you look at the upstream end, it kind of curls, it kind of progresses to the west and then curls to the south under Pine Street and into Lionel Lakes.
Sure. And I'm wondering if, I think it was 10 years ago or about, they came through and they assessed every property owner that went through to clean that ditch out. And now I know property owners to the north of that, quite a ways to the north of that, they haven't been able to keep their sloughs to have water in it. Historically, there would always be water in a drought. And nowadays, there's no water in their properties with that Rice Creek running through it. So, and that's been since they cleaned that ditch out. So, put new culverts in and all that. So, if that's forced the flooding down to the south.
I don't know, I guess it's a puzzle. So it sounds like we'll have a letter that the city will draft just clarifying our stance, and then maybe we can think, maybe Bill, if you could come back with just like, if we wanted to pursue this in a, what else can we do matter? Where do we start?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think what we could do, in addition to the letter, is staff could discuss it at our September staff meeting to see if we collectively have recommendations to bring back to you.
Okay.
You're at that meeting, right, Jesse?
Sorry?
You're at the staff meetings,
Yep.
right? Okay.
So that'll be good, Bill. Anything else?
I can also take a look at the letter that Elizabeth presumably will draft.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Thank you, Janet. All right, let's move on to City Council Guidelines and Procedures, pages 49 through 56.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this document comes out of your work session. We looked at a number of models. What's significantly absent is a long section on bylaws. The direction from the council at the work session was to prepare rules of procedure and generally and then specifically address open forum. So we didn't do bylaws, didn't feel we needed to coming out of that discussion. We did address the open forum procedures. So open forum, the public is not restricted to items on the agenda or not on the agenda. So they could address both items on the agenda or not on the agenda. But as we discussed, since there are hearings for land use, zoning, and licensing matters, those comments from the public would be dealt with in those hearings. So that's really just kind of a snapshot of what you've got, and I would take any questions you have.
So this is Janet. I thought we did decide we wanted to have bylaws. We have bylaws for the Planning Commission. We have bylaws for the EDA, I believe. We don't have bylaws for the council. I thought we decided we did want to have bylaws.
No, I made a note that evening that the council specifically said we don't need bylaws. We've operated without them, but you wanted specific rules of procedure. So my note specifically said the council didn't feel it was necessary to adopt bylaws at this time.
So this is Sue. I don't remember the meeting. But can you remind me what would, if we had bylaws, what would that help us? Or would it help us or not really? Or does this pretty much cover everything that we, our rules are kind of bylaws in a way?
Right, you could call these bylaws. I mean, I think the only difference is there was a significant amount of how people conduct themselves as council members, absenteeism, things like that. But the direction specifically was it was a lengthy model provided by the league, and the direction at the end of the evening was, well, we don't need all of that. What we really want is council rules of procedure, and this all came up in the context of open forum. So that's what we've drafted. I'm happy to go back and look at the bylaws if there's things that you think should be in here. These, as Councilmember Wagaman said, you could put the title bylaws on here and it would function much like bylaws if you wanted. It's just there was a lot of unnecessary material, and one of the prefatory comments that I made is that in practice the city has followed much of what was suggested as bylaws in the materials presented by the league.
This is Rob, and I guess my point on it, I guess I'm kind of with you, Bill, whether it could say bylaws right on it. It feels like it covers most things of a normal meeting and such. Is what's missing out of it, Janet, that?
What's missing is the behavioral part or the absenteeism. I mean, in our bylaws for the Planning Commission, it makes it really clear. The expectation is made really clear that you're expected to attend 80% of the meetings. And when we do our interviews with them, we let them know. So if they feel like, oh gosh, I didn't realize that, they opt out instead of getting on the board and then finding out that, oh, so I have to be at every 80% of them. So the thing I like about bylaws is that it's something you can give to people or to the public actually, so that they know what the expectations are. And, I've seen the bylaws for this, we're actually drafting them for our Sunrise Board, and Rice Creek has them, and lots of city councils have them, and they generally have some of the stuff that's in here, but they also, procedural things in there, but they also have clear expectations of how you are expected to conduct yourself or attend meetings as a council member. And, to Bill's point, I guess it'd be better to have it before you have a problem, because then you get into the situation that you're targeting people, right? But if you have bylaws ahead of time that it's the consensus of the council that's how we all agree we should be doing business, then you're not targeting anybody, and it's really clear going forward that that's the expectation. So I totally agree with Bill that what the league put out was overkill. We do not need something of that detailed level. But I feel like the part that's missing from the procedural stuff is what I just described. And it's been helpful. It's been helpful, at least when we've done interviews for the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Or if you run into people where they really can't make the meetings, and it's like you can have that conversation because it was clear what the expectation was.
Sure, sure. And this here, this is just pertaining to the council, and I guess I see it as we're being held responsible by the people that vote us in, not by each other. You know, so I don't think it's up to the council to say if you miss X amount of meetings, you can't get voted back in, or you can't be that. So they leave it up to the public to decide whether they want that person there or not.
Well, you're right there, because the bylaws wouldn't give the council permission to say, you know, you missed too many meetings, you're out of here.
So that's not what you're leaning towards on this?
There's different, I mean, it depends on how things are set up, how the disciplinary side of things are set up as to what the repercussions of violating the bylaws are.
Sure.
But again, my point is not anything other than I just always am most comfortable when there's expectations. I mean, you do that as a manager with supervisors. You have expectations for how people are supposed to, you know, have professionalism or conduct themselves in a workplace, and that way there's no misunderstanding. And you know, I think it's not unreasonable or rare that a council would have something like that, and we have it for our other boards.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be long and lengthy like the league's examples are, that's for sure.
They definitely tend to overdo it.
Well, they cover their bases.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I could take a look and cross-reference some of the other bylaws and see what's appropriate for the council. Certainly, there can be an expectation about attendance, but as discussed by the members, it's not something that you can impose short of an election cycle. So why don't we, if there is consensus that there's some additional information you want to see here, it doesn't have to be lengthy, and I'd be fairly selective in what was added.
Yeah, I'm in favor of adding some content like that.
I would too.
So you'll take that back, Bill, and bring it to another meeting, correct?
Yes. Yep. I can even think of one matter where, and I don't need to name the council, but there was a communications issue, and having those expectations on communication would have been helpful. So I can see a couple paragraphs being added on behavioral expectations and attendance.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
All right,
Sure.
thank you. So we're on to the attorney report. Do you have anything else for us tonight, Bill?
That was it.
All right.
Thank you.
Number 14, Mayor and City Council members report. Rob?
No report, Mayor.
I will just say that things are progressing rapidly towards Fall Fest. It's really getting to be exciting. We have a lot of new things that are in place this year. One of them is a very successful fundraising effort that just ended on the 22nd. I think the final number is 11,500. Is that what you remember, Elizabeth?
I think I was told today it was 12,500. And then I just also want to remind council and or mayor and council members, you only authorized me to sign up to 6,500. So I don't know where you're at with your.
We're not anywhere near that yet.
Okay.
You're good.
I just wanted to make sure because we're kind of we're getting kind of close.
And I think, I mean, the bill for Fall Fest will not be that high. So we will have some carry forward for events if we choose to do events next year earlier in the season, or to put it towards next year's Fall Fest. I think, you know, this year was an experiment in a way, you know, having a volunteer committee that was really doing more than just sort of nodding to what's kind of been done in the past. And so the idea of having it be a 3-day event instead of a 1-day event, the drive-in movie idea, the Columbus at the races idea, there's some new demonstrations that are going to happen. had the order for our volunteer T-shirts be put in, and there's, I think, 27 people that I have on the list that are going to be volunteers. So, I mean, we've got a lot of participation, and I'm really happy with how it's all gone. It's been a lot of work, but I feel like we have a really good template for next year moving forward, and we'll be able to get, you know, started a lot earlier. And we got our 4th food truck, so we now have, and it's a tater tot one, which is what we really wanted. So I'm really, we'll have food trucks. So that's my report. Good job to Karen and to Lynn, who've really done a great job co-chairing this, and the rest of the folks, the classic car guys, are right on board with what they usually do, and a lot of new members that have stepped up and wanted to be part of this. So,
Well, congratulations,
Good job.
Janet.
yeah.
Thank you. Sue,
No report.
Ron,
Well, I do have a report, but it's about the park board. I sat in last night, sat in for Janet, and I'll just give you a brief. And the way I look at the agenda tonight, that means that our public director will follow me. So when I make mistakes, you just butt in here. There were 4 issues that were discussed last night, which the board dwelled on. The first issue concerned continuing the fencing from Kettle River Boulevard to the north between the parking lot on Notre Dame and the park. The board was in consensus that this project should be funded. The Public Works Director, Jim Winstead, will be getting an up-to-date bid on that project and present that to them, the park board, on September 28th meeting. They hope to vote on this issue and have it for our council meeting on October 11th. There seems to be I'm not saying a rush, but Jim would like to get it bid out early.
I think what our intention is going to be is I'll get new bids for this year, knowing that if we don't install it till next year, the bids will probably be higher again. So I know October is getting to be late in the year, so it would be my intention, if city council approves, that we would purchase the fencing with the caveat that if they can't get it installed this year, we would get this year's pricing for next year. So that's kind of the thought process.
what kind of fencing is this?
It'll be the same fencing that we have around now, so 5-foot black nylon fencing. There'll be 4 openings along the parking lot area with a gate on the far end, on the north end, for vehicle traffic to go in and out, for, you know, Jimmy Johnny's or events or, you know, mowing, just whatever might need to happen there.
And what was the reason they want to add this fence?
Why?
Yeah,
Well, like Jim says, those big 6x6 blocks been breaking. They've been discussing this for some time, but those treated lumber that they got for barricades so people don't pull out on the grass or on the ball fields, which they've done, are falling down. They had to be replaced. So this issue came up. This came up, what, probably in April or maybe even January or February.
We've actually talked about it for a few years. Just what the, I don't know, we'll call the next phase would be. We started probably, I'm gonna take a stab and say 8 years ago, with the black fencing along Kettle River. We used to have telephone poles there just to stop vehicles from going in there. And then we removed those and put in the fencing, and that was kind of the start of our fencing plan. Then we fenced a year or 2 later along Kettle River on the south side of the road for that ball field area there. And now the next step is, you know, along the parking lot in the main, for the main park.
yeah, thank you. What else, Ron?
Yeah, and then the second issue discussed concerned the lighting at the park on Kettle River and Notre Dame. The board was again in agreement to reposition the one light that's on the far, I would say that's east, the far east part by the tennis court that's bordering Kettle River, and move that, reposition it farther to the west, which would be more like across from the fire hall or across somewhere along the walking path where the new trees are, because it's inefficient what it's doing up there. It's just shining on the trees. Second of all, they would like to increase the lights by 2 and put a light over by the tennis court parking lot and a light down by 165th, the other small parking lot on the north end of the park. Put a light in there. They'd like to increase those 2. And they were on consensus that until the bid comes in from Jim, that again, on the 28th of September, they'll be reviewing that, and hopefully it'll be before us on the 11th. And again, the third thing on the discussion was the tennis court, and this has been an ongoing issue, and about what to do with it. It's deteriorating, whether you seal it or the cracks or what. So it's an ongoing issue, but that was discussed. And then there was a final issue that the board did have a question about the master plan and its status. And Jim was going to look into that and see where it's at. And even, there was another item about, the board did take a motion to have the city staff update the park capital fund, number 403, and the park land fund of 404. And Jim can probably discuss that later, but it's just a budgetary deal. Am I correct?
Correct.
And that was the meeting. That's the way it was on August 22nd.
All right, thank you. Thank you for filling in for Janet.
Well, so I have a question. So do we talk to Dean about the park master plan and finishing that up for us?
He's going to think about it.
He's going to think about it? That's the status.
That's the status.
That is the status.
That is the status.
Status, okay.
Yeah, whoever wants to bring that back, that's the status.
So basically, all the stuff that Ron talked about, the 403, the 404 fund, the 150 operating fund, those are all things that we'll talk about during budget time. I'll have new numbers in there, so the updated pricing for the fencing, and hopefully have, some updated numbers for resurfacing of the tennis courts and the lighting that they're talking about. So I'll have all of that stuff. I'll talk about all of that later on, but he hit it on the head.
Did we get, I seem to remember that there was, those tennis courts have been there for what, 30 years or, a long, long time. So we've gotten our money's worth out of them. And I thought we were going to have somebody come in and look at them to say, does it make sense to resurface them, or are they really end of life and you're just putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound? And I don't know if we ever did that or not. Did we? Did we have somebody come in who actually could answer that kind of question? Because I think that was the question of the park board, was what's the best course of action?
So I've attempted to make contact with a handful of people to come out and look at that, to no avail at this point. At the meeting last night, talking about goals and, what they would like to see, it was their intention to resurface one more time, and then that gets us another 6 years of time, knowing that we have the park trail replacement coming up. That's a big dollar amount. I'm going to take a stab and say that replacing the tennis courts, $50,000. I really don't know. You know what I mean? There's some things that need to happen. So with all of that, they're kind of prioritizing fencing, trail replacement, and you know what I mean? So that's what I got out of it last night. So Elizabeth and I chatted briefly today, and I'll start getting some numbers together to make sure what we have on that 403, 404 operating fund, that those numbers are relatively accurate for, those projects.
Okay.
Anything else, Jim, from Public Works?
Oh, I have lots of stuff.
Oh. Keep rolling.
So at the last council meeting, we talked about lighting on Hornsby Street, removing that one light that was hit. Rob asked me how much it would cost. I threw out a number of $500. Then I started thinking about it, and I hate throwing out numbers because every time you do, you're wrong. So I looked up what we paid last time, and it was $1,600. So I contacted our vendor at that point, and they said that they would do it for a not to exceed $1,200 to remove that concrete base and put a handhole in there basically, so they, connect all the wiring in there. And then, at any given time when we decide to reinstall or not reinstall, we just put it right back in. So that was one thing. The other thing that our attorney asked was, what would it cost to move the lighting? I had previously gotten a bid for that. If we keep the lighting on the west side of Hornsby Street, there's some right-of-way constraints, meaning that the road is wide enough, there's a little bit of grass, then you got an 8-foot trail, and there's really no right-of-way on the backside of the trail to move the lighting to. Plus, there's power back there and, some other utilities. So the easier route and the best route to not run over light poles would be to move them to the east side of the road. And a rough estimate from a contractor was $18,000. And that would be to move all, I believe there's 8 lights, 7 currently today, well, 6 currently today, because one is down that we talked about, and we had one removed that got hit multiple times. So to move them to the east side of the road would be roughly 18,000.
To move all of them.
To move all of them. So they would have to bore under the road and then, basically pull out all the existing lights, move them to the other side of the road, which would make sense because the lighting, the traffic coming from 97 or 23 is slow speed at that point, and that's where the curves would be. So the lighting on those curves, they would be not driving higher speeds from north to south like they currently are today, and then drive straight off the road into those light poles. So anybody going from north to south, or from the north to the south, the lights would be on the opposite side of the road. We would cure that problem.
How was it decided to put them on the wrong side to start with?
Because it lit up the sidewalk.
Yeah, because that's where the park trail is.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, that was why they're there. It's not really to light up the road, it's to light up the walking path.
Kind of, some of each, but, you light up the road and, more so the walking trail though.
Well, everybody, when you're going on Forest Lake, go up Hornsby at night and see, for $1,200, you can bury that, and it's done with. If you think it looks dark and dangerous, then we consider in a few years to switch them all to the other side. But I don't think that's necessary. There's lights from the bridge, there's lights from the coffee shop, there's lights from Love's. So everybody look at it and think about it. All right.
So are you recommending that we move forward with taking out the cement base and capping it off?
That's what I would like to see, as opposed to the 18,000.
So do you need,
So since we talked about this before and we've talked about it somewhat extensively, I would like a motion to say that, to have a contractor move it for $1,200 is not to exceed $1,200.
Who's your contractor for that?
Forest Lake Contracting.
Yeah.
so I'll make a motion to direct Jim to have a vendor, Forest Lake Contracting, move that concrete base of the lighting fixture that was mowed over by the car multiple times and cap off the wires.
Perfect.
Not to exceed, did you say not?
Not to exceed 1,200. Thank you.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any other questions or discussion?
I just got a question, Jim. So what, are we paying for these poles when they get whacked off, or is the insurance companies paying for them?
Well, our insurance company covers it for us. I will tell you that I'm going to take a guess and say that we've probably had 6 light poles hit. 2 of the 6, we've actually known who's done it. The one that we're talking about tonight, the driver was using his girlfriend's car and there was no insurance on the vehicle. So I get updates from the league, and the owner of the vehicle, so the lady of the vehicle, she was willing to pay restitution to pay for it, you know, I mean, she hypothetically, I don't know if she would be liable or not liable, I don't know the legality of that, but when they contacted her, she said that she would attempt to pay. Whether she has or not, I don't know, but the League of Minnesota Cities pays us, so we're good. Then it's just, do they recoup their money?
I have one more question. What do those light poles run?
I think for the light pole and the fixture on the top, and we always have to fix the base because when they hit it, that base is probably, I think they're 5 or 6 feet tall into the ground. They get moved every time, so they have to reset those. I think it's about $5,500.
Yeah,
So-
it's pretty spendy.
So we got 7 of them still standing?
I believe there's 6
6.
today.
So that's about, my math's right, it's about $30,000, right?
Correct.
So 18,000 doesn't sound bad if you move them across the street and they're not getting hit. I mean, if you look at the long run of it, I think that's good common sense. They don't get up enough speed. It's almost like the 35 speed limit up at the school district. I mean,
Right.
Columbus, they don't get enough speed, so whatever. But yeah, that's all my discussion was.
So it's been moved and seconded. I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, I.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor, this is Kevin here.
Oh, yep.
Can I make a comment related to this, the lighting? Thought came to mind as we continue our discussions with Forest Lake on Eureka and Hornsby improvement and the pursuit of potential grant funding to improve the last portion of Hornsby. Maybe we evaluate whether we want to move the lighting and include that as part of a potential grant request. I'm just throwing that out there, so.
Yeah,
Good thought.
good thought. Thank you.
Yeah, good idea.
So the last thing that I have, Mr. Mayor and Council, is just a kind of a informational / update. Last week on Tuesday on 8/15, there was an accident on Hornsby Street on the south side going into Love's. There was a 2-vehicle accident where a pickup truck ran into a semi-truck, and when it hit the side of the semi-truck, it actually ruptured the fuel cell. So we had, I don't know, somewhere between 100 and 200 gallons of diesel fuel that dumped out onto the road, which in turn kind of ran off to onto the shoulders. So we need to do some, we don't need to, but there's a company that's going to do some soil corrections. They've applied for a permit, so they'll be doing that in the next, I don't know, week or 2 potentially. But the bigger portion of that is that amount of diesel fuel that was dumped on the road. Before police and fire could get there and actually close the road, that diesel fuel got tracked back and forth on Hornsby Street. And diesel fuel is not a good thing to have on asphalt, so we will be in the somewhat near future, once I get all the information from the fire chief, probably doing a repair project. So we'll be milling off, I don't know, Kevin and I kind of went out there and looked at it, probably 2 inches of asphalt for some portion of it, and then for full width, and then just like from shoulder to center line for another portion. I don't remember exactly how far that all was, but we'll kind of talk about that when we get that far. But I just kind of wanted to update anybody on that, and if anybody had any questions, we could kind of talk about it.
Well, my only question is, what does insurance, like their vehicle insurance, pay for damage of anything else besides the other car?
They
Like
should.
the road?
They should, yes. Again, I'm not an attorney. Bill could probably maybe speak to that, but I don't have the information from the fire chief yet at this point. So, you know, we have the driver of the vehicle that got hit. We have the driver of the vehicle that hit the other driver. It would be my assumption that we would probably do the project, like our insurance would pay for it, just like a light pole, and then our insurance company would go after
Okay.
their insurance companies, is what my assumption is on the process. So
Okay.
same as a light pole. I would turn it in as a claim, and then we would do the repairs, and then they do their legal side of it. And if
Okay.
I'm wrong, Bill, you can speak up.
No, that's correct, Jim.
Thank you.
Any other good news?
If there's no more questions, that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. Elizabeth, City Administrator's report. Whoops, wait a minute. Public Communication report. Anything?
I don't have a true report, but I will share two good tidbits of news. The billboard, I got confirmation from my contact over there, his name's Ari, that the Fall Fest ads are up on the billboards. So if you feel like camping out on 35, I think they play for 8 seconds, one every 4 cycles, which I forget the math on that. I forget how long a cycle is, and then multiply that by 4. So, but they are up there. He showed me webcam pictures, so it's not just going off of hearsay. They are up there, so it is being promoted. The other just follow-up is newsletter work. I'm going to be meeting with Jim and his team tomorrow morning, and we are so close on that newsletter. So hopefully you'll get drafts to just peruse that hopefully next week, and we can start sending that over to the printer and get that in people's mailboxes. So,
Okay.
Thank
other
you.
than that, I have nothing further.
Elizabeth.
Mr. Mayor and council members, you got 2 items from me in the additions today. The first addition, at the top of it, it says ordinance number 23XX. It says an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the City Code regulating the sale of tobacco. This is the additions for the Friday meeting, so just want to make sure everybody remembers that we do have a meeting, very short meeting. There is a tobacco, it's a public hearing for the tobacco ordinance, and I've asked Bill to make one edit, and it's a minor edit. If you look at section 4-519, last year when we were renewing the liquor licenses, and if you remember, we had a section that said, no person under the age of 18 shall be employed in any of the rooms constituting a place where 3-2 beer was being sold. And nowadays, if you exclude 18 and 16-year-olds from your workplace of work, you won't probably have anybody working. And so we indicated that there was going to be a housekeeping amendment, that we were going to eliminate that. And so he's eliminating that, or the recommendation is eliminating that clause, and then replacing it with no person under the age of 21 may enter a license established for the purpose of purchasing or having served or delivered alcohol beverage. And then that will also be a condition of a liquor license. So there, it's just that was the edit. It was a minor housekeeping edit. And today, when you looked at the liquor license that you were issuing, the condition states some very similar language, rather than indicating to them that they could not have anybody under the age of 18 employed in any of the rooms in which the 3-2 beer was being sold. So I wanted you to make sure you had the additions up front, and also the summary publication was amended to add those housekeeping amendments. Questions on the tobacco additions? I just wanted you to have them ahead of time before Friday's meeting. Secondly, you have the shoreline ordinance, and this ordinance keeps coming back. And here we had some problems with clarity and some numbering issues, and we've had this issue now for a couple of different ordinances. And what's happening is we are adopting ordinances out of order. When you adopt ordinances out of order and then you go try to put them in the bigger document, in our master document, things don't line up well when you're looking at numbering. So we're having a problem at the end of the day when we go to after all is said and done, we publish it and we do it, and then we get to the master document and things don't line up. So in this particular case, we do not have things lined up. And so what came back to us was the numbering is wrong in some of the sections, and there was some clarifying language that needed to be clarified. So I'm here before you tonight to ask you to approve the new Chapter 7 and Chapter 7A and E for consistency and numbering for the shoreland regulations. We will re-record it, and then when we put it in the master ordinance document, the numbers will align.
So the only thing that's changed is the numbering.
It's the numbering, yes. So, and clarifying is just making sure that they're in the right, right sections and moving things around. We had so many red lines in this particular ordinance that when you start crossing out things, it has to realign, so you had to move things around with tables and such. But that, there is no language change at all.
Who sends it back? Is it I can't remember the name of the vendor that now has all of our ordinances online.
Yeah, it's not the vendor. We send the vendor the final product. So it's actually someone in Bill's office that actually puts it all together and has the master document. And she sent it back to us saying, this isn't going to work because the numbering doesn't match. And so at that point, you can't have things not numbered right. That's the whole point of codification, is to number them right. So the only way we can do this is to adopt it again and then re-record it so that all the numbers are right.
All right.
I'm all for that.
So I'll make the motion to adopt ordinance 22-02, amending Chapter 7A and Chapter E for consistency with the state shoreland regulations, approving numerical changes. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye. Anything else, Elizabeth?
I have nothing further.
All right. So announcements and reminders. Everybody remember Friday morning is our special meeting at 9 o'clock here. Planning Commission, September. So there are no meetings all next week. It's the 5th week, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then quickly, September 6th will be here, 6 p.m. Planning Commission, EDA, and City Council on September 12th at 5:30. City Council meeting on the 13th at 6 p.m. And the whole calendar is on the back. Would anyone like to make the motion to adjourn?
It's Rob, so move.
And a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Our meeting is adjourned at 7:30. Thank you, everyone.